The following is an HDNet original presentation.
Good evening from Governor's Island in New York. The big news on everybody's mind these days is the high unemployment rate. It's over 9%. Nearly 14 million men and women without a paycheck. But despite that sobering number, there are jobs in America, thousands of jobs, as you'll hear tonight, that are going to what are known as foreign guest workers. We've always been a nation of immigrants. The millions who passed through these waters a century ago helped fuel an unprecedented era of prosperity. Today, America's business leaders say we need to continue to attract the world's best and brightest talent to compete in a global economy and to create new American jobs. But tonight you're going to hear the voices of Americans who feel they've been displaced by foreign guest workers, who say the temporary worker program is different from immigration of the past. You will hear raw emotions, anger, and a lot of questions about why respected business leaders like Bill Gates would be arguing that America needs more foreign workers when so many of our fellow citizens are struggling to find a job.
I cannot overstate the importance of overhauling our high-skilled immigration system. We have to welcome the great minds in this world, not shut them out of our country. Unfortunately, our immigration policies are driving away the world's best and brightest precisely when we need them the most.
You know what I want to say? Bill Gates, I'm the best and brightest, hire me. I've proven myself to you and everybody else, and I can assure you, if you want to stack up the people in my students with any guest worker and the skills that they have, they're going to be just as good, if not better. And they understand the culture, they understand the society, they paid their dues, they're part of the community. We are here, we are the best and the brightest.
So yeah, this is the lovely Microsoft campus. And here is the building that I worked in for a few years when I worked at Microsoft Office. I'm not sure exactly, it's one of these buildings. It's the one that Bill Gates had started in or had like the original campuses across the street. But here's building 36. That one really makes it hard for me to see. It's like when I started to understand what was going on with why I was laid off, it was like peeling back an onion, and I continue to just feel that every single time you pull it back, it's worse than what you would ever imagine. And it's just not what I thought I was doing. I mean, I was taught to work hard and do well in school, and I did all that stuff, and I did a great job, and I would never imagine that I would have been out of work for 2 years, aggressively looking for a job, becoming a Phi Beta Kappa student, and it just doesn't matter.
I was a music major in college, and after I graduated from college, I moved to New York and worked in Wall Street. And as a music major undergrad, there's not that many jobs, so I had to start out as a secretary. And I worked my way through graduate school at night at New York University and got a degree in MBA in computer applications and ended up spending 12 years on Wall Street. So when I was age 31, I got promoted to being a vice president at JP Morgan in the mergers and acquisitions area, doing quantitative analysis type of work. Let's see, I've lived in Seattle since 1992, moved here from New York. My favorite thing is being outdoors, being with my boyfriend, and hiking, biking. Thanks, sweet. I never had to worry about getting a job, ever. I could get a job in 5 minutes. People were calling me all the time. The world was my oyster. And there was never, ever a problem finding work. It changed in January 2009 when I was laid off from my job at Microsoft. They said that my position had been eliminated. I go into the room and there's somebody there with someone from Human Resources, and they had a package for me and said they're happy to go through everything in there, but that my position had been permanently eliminated and that I could leave that day. Thankfully, I called my boyfriend and he came and helped me collect my personal belongings and said goodbye to a couple people, and that was it. I never had that happen to me before. I've always done very well, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was, and I thought, oh my God, have I gotten old? Am I losing my edge? I have no idea. It wasn't until a couple days later that I really figured out what was really disturbing about it, and it's because I was, for the most part, the most senior person on my team, and I was the only person laid off from the team. And 3 of the people that I worked with had been in the United States less than a year. I mean, up until that point, I was kind of, maybe ignorance is bliss. I mean, I just had been one of these people that had always been accustomed to working in a global environment. So I just assumed that global business is global business, and I don't know if one person has a special skill versus one that doesn't. And I know that Microsoft recruiting is very, I guess I would say, elite. And so, you know, it seemed that they were always hiring people from all around the world. And I kind of wondered, why weren't they hiring people from the local community as much? But I think that's a question a lot of people here ask.
After Mary was laid off in early 2009, she started to realize that somewhere along the line, the job market had changed. It wasn't like the tech companies in Seattle weren't hiring. It's just that they often seem to be looking for foreign guest workers. Every year, U.S. companies use special work visas to hire tens of thousands of foreign guest workers for jobs across the country. The H-1B visa in particular is for, quote, specialty occupations, mostly in the high-tech realm. Mary, like most people in tech, says she'd always thought that by law, companies must first try to hire American workers. But that's not the case. According to Department of Labor guidelines, an H-1B worker, quote, may be hired even when a qualified U.S. worker wants the job, and a U.S. worker can be displaced from the job in favor of the foreign worker, unquote.
There are very few people that know that the H-1B law does not make provisions for making sure that Americans are not affected by it. These employers can recruit exclusively offshore and never have any responsibility to hire an American citizen or even consider us. So the reason that I feel that employers are taking advantage of this system and not finding Americans is because they don't have to. It is not the law. I mean, first and foremost, they're cheaper. Secondly, they are at the beck and call of the employer, because if they don't do whatever it is that they're supposed to be doing, they're deported. I mean, their visas depend on having these jobs in principle. I look at thousands and thousands and thousands of these things. A lot of the jobs, there's nothing special about them. They just have a lot of initials next to them. A lot of the jobs, and I can show you hundreds of them, that they say no college degree, no major required. So there is no special education. Most of these positions, according to the Department of Labor, are entry-level jobs. So I'm now pulling up a site from India where there are a bunch of ads that are posted, and every day, I mean, right now there's 155 ads just in this one category alone that are all brand new that have come over, it looks like, in the last couple of days. And you'll see here, this one I was able to pull up because I've got my stealth mode in here. It's like any course, any specialization, graduation not required, okay? So is that best and brightest? Oh, yeah, this one's good. This particular company is looking to hire B1 or B2, visa preferred. Now, my understanding of a B2 visa is it's like you're a tourist. So when a B1 is somebody that comes over to the United States for a conference or something like that. So it's very odd to me that they would need somebody with that kind of a visa, because that would imply that they're here for a very short amount of time and they're writing health insurance applications. So let's just see what they want. .NET, VB, SQL, Windows development, preferred. Not a problem. I guarantee you there's 50 people right around the corner from here that can do that. This is what they lack. They're American citizens. A qualified American is not eligible to apply. I get so angry when I see these things. I think about all the hard work and so many deserving people that deserve a chance, and I see it every day. It makes me just beside myself.
At the time that Microsoft laid off 5,000 American citizens in 2009, they were building this massive complex that is called the Microsoft Commons. It is an elite shopping mall strictly for Microsoft employees. I think I heard there were like 17 restaurants. People can get massages and haircuts and things like that. And they have exclusive shops. But the thing is that you're not allowed in unless you are a Microsoft employee.
I feel very upset when I go look at the elaborate, expensive community that Microsoft has built up there, and I think, how many people in the community have lost their homes because they can't get work because of this situation? That's what makes me sad. I think that just one of those buildings probably could have saved 1,400 jobs at Microsoft in January of 2009. I mean, it's unrecognizable. I cannot recognize the community. It's just not the same at all. I think there are now 30 Indian restaurants now in this community. I can't go into the supermarket without feeling like I'm in another country. I don't mean to say that that's bad, but when you've been in the community and you've contributed so much and you can't see even the people that you're used to seeing, I mean, the demographics are completely different. I think 1/3 of the population of this town is from India.
That's the perception among many high-tech workers we talked to in Seattle, that the number of people from India has skyrocketed. But it is not 1/3 of the population. In the suburb of Redmond, home to Microsoft, the number of people of Indian descent totals over 11% of the local population. But that's a 4-fold increase from a decade ago. Of course, many of these people are American citizens, and companies like Microsoft often point out that the only way to put their foreign employees on the path of citizenship is through guest worker programs. Roughly half of the H-1B workers who come to the United States each year are from India.
It's a very simple thing for people to judge that you might be sounding like you're biased or you're prejudiced or you're something, and it's not that at all. I mean, I don't care who's from Mars. I mean, Americans are every nationality and everything like that, but I think it's more about just taking care of the people that are part of the country, and charity begins at home. So this isn't anything to do with being prejudiced, and I'm not against global competition. What I am opposed to is segregated employment, and our employment situation with the laws that we have today in place are disqualifying American citizens for jobs in their own zip code. There is an unlimited supply of people from across the world that come over in this labor arbitrage environment that are cheaper, lowering the salaries for everybody. And we're caught in the middle of that whole thing. There's just not that many jobs available. I mean, things that were here 2-3 years beforehand are simply not around. I know so many people that have been out of work for a very, very long time, and it's just debilitating. I would go to a place called WorkSource for the state of Washington because you have to go in there and attend seminars, and they had a couple on like resumes and different things for older workers. And it was people just like me, you know, educated professionals who had been in careers for a really long time, who were accomplished, who were articulate, and they suddenly find themselves without a job. They find themselves without health insurance. They find themselves in foreclosure and a lot of other things. It's heartbreaking. I hear regularly I'm overqualified, and I would go to the resume people at the school and at WorkSource and the outsourcing people. I say, what do I do so that I'm not appearing overqualified for these jobs? And so I would take a whole bunch of stuff off, and I was going to take my MBA off. And that was a big deal to me because I worked at night for 5 years to go and get that degree, and it was something I was really proud of. And the thought that I would have to take it off my resume was troublesome, to say the least. I just felt like it's either that or working at McDonald's, and I worked at McDonald's when I was 16, so I guess I could get something there. But yeah, that was what I was about to do. I'd say in general, one thing that I learned the hard way is that, you know, people would say, well, what have you been doing? And I told them the truth. I said, oh, I was laid off. And I'm going to school, and I'm Phi Beta Kappa, and I'm working part-time, and like the conversations would just stop. If I was on a phone interview or something like that, and they say, so what have you been doing? And I tell them I was laid off from Microsoft, and then immediately it changed, the tone. Thank you very much. The people that were laid off were considered damaged goods. And it was, from what I understand, people were discouraged from hiring them. I guess the way that I can describe why this makes me feel upset is because I would go to the WorkSource office here in Redmond, and I'd be waiting for hours to speak with someone, and I'd be sitting there saying, oh my gosh, how am I going to buy dinner? I can't afford to do almost anything. And I think one day I had to go to, there's a, you know, Target was just around the corner in another store. And you walk out that door, and then you walk into the parking lot, and you see guest workers and their families surrounding the jewelry departments right in my community, 50 yards away. And I thought, something's wrong with this. This is not fair. I want a chance to compete for a job in my own country. And why can those people be, you know, looking at trinkets when we're hungry and we're losing our unemployment? I just don't understand it. We've paid our dues, we've paid our taxes, we understand the culture, we've contributed, and we are being excluded from opportunities in our own country. And I think that this is wrong, and this is why I'm talking to you today. I was out of work for 2 years. I lost my house, I lost my health insurance, I lost my life savings. I still have my health, and it was the worst experience of my life. And, you know, standing out and saying that the laws need to change is a big scary thing, because I don't want it to happen again.
We wanted to talk to Microsoft about why they are sponsoring guest workers when so many local tech workers are looking for jobs. Bill Gates declined our request for an interview. In fact, no one from Microsoft would speak to us on camera. They did issue this written statement. Quote, unfortunately, Microsoft won't be able to contribute to the piece you're working on, but thank you for your interest.
It's the law. The law is the problem. That's what has to change. There's got to be wording in there that says that these employers must seek local talent. They don't have to today. And so the reason Bill Gates can't find talent, in my mind, is because he doesn't need to. He's not required to. He is acting legally according to the laws of the United States. And that's the problem.
It seemed like when American Express management would go out of their way to tell us, don't worry, your job's not going to be sent to India, that's kind of the alarm of that's when you need to worry. That's American Express Service Center. It's where I worked for about 5 years. It got to be scary. I mean, you come in every day and wonder, is today the day I'm going to find out if my job's going to India? And there was just this constant threat of layoffs. We just get emails continually saying, you know, the economy's getting bad, we may have to do some layoffs, and I never thought it would happen to me. I never in a million years thought it would happen to me. I guess it was in the beginning of January, I was told that we're hiring 2 people from our service center in New Delhi, India, to come here and to help back me up because I was the only person doing my job. And so they brought these 2 guys over, and about a week after they were brought here, I was pulled into an office and told that I had 45 days to train these guys on how to do my job because I was being let go because they were going to take the job and send it back to India. They did not have the skill set at all for the position. I write SQL code from scratch, and that's what you have to be able to do to query data from these different tables. They didn't know the first thing about SQL. I had to basically teach them how to write SQL code on top of teaching them how to use it to extract all these different data points from these tables, and they just didn't get it. And I knew so many other people that would have been happy to take that job that have the skill sets that are right here in America. And I just don't understand how these 2 guys got picked to do this job when they didn't have the skills at all. It was really a humiliating experience having to train them. First of all, I was told by my director that if I didn't do a good enough job training them, they would withhold my severance package, which I couldn't afford to lose because it was a sizable amount of money based on the years I'd been there. So I was always every day living in fear that that they were going to find something that I didn't do good enough to train them and just take my severance pay away from me. It was explained to me that these 2 guys were hired so that American Express could save costs. I was making $47,000 a year. I flat out asked these guys, how much are you making? They're both making $10,000 a year. I know that American Express in India doesn't sponsor any kind of 401k programs. I don't believe there's any kind of health insurance benefits or anything like that. So in the long run, it was just a lot cheaper to hire these 2 guys over me. You can't live in the United States on $10,000 a year when you've got a family to support. I have 2 small children. There's no way I can compete with that. These guys in India, they could take $10,000 a year and, you know, telling me about how they've got a nanny to watch their kids and a driver to drive them places, and you can live like a king over there, but I can't compete with that here.
You still feel like you have animosity?
Oh, I definitely do, especially since I found out that the 2 guys I trained are now back here at my old office doing the job when I was told that the reason why I was let go is because my job was migrated to India. You know, I definitely don't blame the guys that took my job. I know they were kind of innocent victims in this, as I was. I don't harbor any personal resentment towards them. They were fun guys, nice guys, you know. They're just trying to make money to support their families as well. I think American Express should be ashamed of themselves for doing this. There's a lot of people that have worked there for many, many years that got put out of a job and it got sent to India. And these people, you know, they're in their late 50s, 60s. I mean, it's hard to start all over again when you're that old. I'm not suggesting they did anything illegal. I'm just suggesting what they are doing is hurting this country. You know, I'm unemployed. I can't find a job now. I'm not paying into the tax system anymore. I'm not paying into Social Security, etc. Instead, you know, I'm looking for a job, not having any success, and getting unemployment benefits sent to me every week from the government. And here I am with a 4-year degree, and it's just sad. It took a huge toll on our family financially. We basically cashed in my 401k and used my severance pay towards our bills, and we just tried to live on my husband's paycheck, and that's what we've been doing since. Unfortunately, we've had to file for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, and we may end up losing our home. I mean, I've been looking for a new job in the IT industry as an analyst ever since I was let go in 2009, and I haven't gotten past a first interview with anyone. Come on, Marcus. I don't think I lack any skills to compete. I think I've got a great skill set. I think what I lack to compete is that I'm not from India and that I can't live on $10,000 a year.
We made repeated requests to speak to representatives of American Express. They, too, refused an interview. But in a statement, they said, quote, "We are not able to discuss specifics about current or former employees. American Express is an equal opportunity employer, and as a truly global company, we have more than 60,000 employees located around the world. We strive to have the right people in the right place servicing our customers," unquote. Diane has decided to leave the technology business, and she's going to cosmetology school. But starting over isn't for everyone, especially for tech workers who've lost their jobs in the twilight of their careers.
The thought that human beings can build something that can just fly through the air, I mean, you can't see air, you can hardly feel it, but the fact that you can build something that'll, you know, climb to 354,000 feet and come back to Earth, and that to me is just amazing, that we have that kind of capability as a people. Well, I've always been interested in aerospace. I grew up during I was 9 years old when Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and that's always, you know, been a part of me. And I wanted to work in that field. And so it just seemed natural that I would work for Sperry because they were a big company locally. You know, a lot of people worked there. I was actually still in college, and I went and applied at Sperry. And by the time I drove home from the interview, they had already called the house to offer me a job. So that's how that all started. And I stayed at the same company for 27 years, although the company changed names repeatedly. It was acquired by Burroughs, changed its name to Unisys, was acquired by Honeywell, and then merged with Allied Signal. And I went from being just a test technician on the bench to ending up in test engineering, where I designed test systems and wrote the software for them. Test engineering isn't normally what companies like to spend money on. They don't generally see it as a value-added sort of thing. And so they had made the decision that an organization in India was going to do the majority of the test engineering. So they were bringing people in from India to learn what we were doing. And they told us that in the end we would be managing the Indians while they did the actual technical work in Bangalore. And probably not all of you were safe, some of you. They didn't say who, they didn't say how many, but it was obvious that if the line engineering, you know, the production engineering was going to be done in India, that we wouldn't all be there in the future.
Well, he didn't tell me that part. You know, he just came home stressed every day. You know, that's the part I saw, is I saw the after-work stress. You know, his bosses would call him after hours, you know, they'd call him in on weekends, you know, and it would make him, you know, just really frustrated, and he'd have to go in, and then, you know, he never could even take vacation. You know, for that last year, they kept telling him, well, we can't, you know, we can't have you out of the office right now. We just, you know, you can't be off right now.
We would teach them what we did, teach them about the products, and they would go back to Bangalore and they would start to develop the technical capability to do what we did here, there. And more of them started to come, and more of them started to come. I remember one day I was walking out, and the Indians were in this sort of courtyard between buildings playing cricket. And that's just not something you ever expect to see. Not that there's anything wrong with it, you just never see it. And that's when you realize, you know, there are enough Indians there that they can actually play cricket in the courtyard. There were a lot of Indians.
I called him at work, and, you know, he usually, you know, had a voice message, you know, answering message on there. And I thought I had dialed the wrong number, because it was the message telling me the extension numbers of his bosses. And I thought, well, that's not right. And so I dialed the number again, and I got the same message. And about that time, maybe about 30 minutes later, he walked in the door and told me that he had lost his job, that they had fired him. It was devastating to both of us. I don't know whether I could come up with words to describe the hurt, okay, after seeing what he had gone through for this company, what he had given up for this company, for the entire preceding year. And knowing that he had been there 27 years. You know, he was just a few years away from a time when he could have retired. And they fired him.
We first heard about the Hammond story when Jean wrote us an email. She said Honeywell fired her husband for what the company said was defrauding them by leaving work early too often. But she said, among engineers, it was common practice to leave early when there was no work left to do and make up the lost time on busier days. She told us her husband kept track of his hours on time cards he kept in his desk. But, according to Jean, her husband was not allowed to return to his desk to get them after he was fired.
Oh, I was so angry that, that they're just real lucky that I wasn't the only one to come across them if they were out of water and broken down in the desert somewhere, because I just waved. And I was terrified for him, because he was just deflated, totally deflated after that. You could just look at his whole demeanor was just caved in.
Well, after that, I thought, well, I'd just take a couple of weeks off and then start looking for something new. And then I had a heart attack. And, you know,
he had a heart attack.
had a heart attack on the morning of July 4th.
Yeah.
And the next day was in surgery, having a quadruple coronary bypass.
Well, it seems a little bit more than coincidental to me that he has this heart attack 2 weeks after he's fired, you know, when he's still in this completely deflated state, completely humiliated state. He lost his job, he lost his insurance, he lost his life insurance, he lost, what else did we lose? God, it was a laundry list, you know, and then he had the heart attack. So we had to like run out, we had to quick apply for COBRA, and found out that was going to be $1,500 a month. We're like, well, that's going to take a bite out of the savings. You know, we thought, wow, we've made it to the part where it's supposed to be okay, you know, and we can relax a little now, you know, almost done. Yeah, and then no, no. So yeah.
Chemo is like having the intestinal flu and a regular flu and a cold simultaneously, and then you have to get out of bed and work while you're doing it. I had to wear Depends to go to work. Your digestive tract becomes so unreliable you can't be more than 30 seconds away from a bathroom. There were times I couldn't make it to work. I'd have to turn around and come home and throw my clothes away. It's so embarrassing.
I don't think that's why people don't work when they're getting cancer treatment. Usually.
Because, yeah, the legendary bookstore experience and things like that, yeah.
We don't have to go into everything.
So it's very hard. It's very hard.
Hey, pretty pudding. Come here.
When I went in for the tandem bone marrow transplant, which was part of my chemo treatment, the hospital wanted $150,000 up front to do it. The normal fee that they charge Medicare or whoever is $300,000, but if you pay in cash, they'll cut it in half. So most of my 401k was to pay for that.
We don't have retirement.
I don't have any retirement prospects anymore, unless I win the lottery.
Yeah.
What is it? You're just gonna work until?
Yeah, I'll work until I slump over at my desk, and then they'll just roll me out in my chair, and that'll be it.
I don't blame anybody for him getting cancer, certainly not. That just happens to people, But I do blame the corporation that put us in such a poor position to deal with it. And the corporations that do that to thousands upon thousands of other people.
We asked to interview a representative from Honeywell Aerospace, but they declined our offer. Instead, they too released a statement which reads in part, quote, Honeywell Aerospace has moved no engineering test work from its Phoenix, Arizona operations, unquote. Former Honeywell workers we spoke to, however, confirmed much of Hammond's account about the company shifting engineering work to India. Business leaders and politicians say it's important to bring highly skilled foreign workers to the United States to stay competitive in a global market. But these advocates often make no distinction between temporary work visa programs and traditional immigration, which allows newcomers to live permanently in the U.S., build lives, and open businesses. The nuances of immigration policy leave many Americans confused with the rhetoric coming out of Washington.
We should make it easier for the best and the brightest to not only stay here, but also to start businesses and create jobs here. In recent years, a full 25% of high-tech startups in the U.S. were founded by immigrants. That led to 200,000 jobs here in America. I'm glad those jobs are here. I want to see more of them created in this country. We need to provide them the chance.
Create jobs for who? I'm curious. I seriously, I want to know, when they say, this is what we need in order to create jobs, who are they creating the jobs for? The people of India? Is that who they're talking about? Or are they somehow trying to convince us that by giving our jobs to foreign workers, that's somehow creating work for us? He could have a t-shirt printed up that says best and brightest. But his job is in India, and he had to find a new one.
Angry is a word I feel comfortable with, yes. Yes. And I've already told you what I do whenever I drive by the campus facility. I send them a one-finger salute just out of force of habit. Blue Cross and Blue Shield is the largest employer in the city of Jacksonville, and they have hired over 600 guest workers in the IT area. And I used to be an IT worker at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Florida. I am still doing IT work as a contractor, no longer working for Blue Cross of Florida, but the Indian population apparently is. I first became aware of it when I saw the number of foreign workers that we had at the Blue Cross campus. And in fact, they started instructing the American workers how to better fit with the Indian workers that we were working with. And I thought that was strange that they were teaching the American workers how to understand the Indian workers as opposed to the Indian workers understanding the American culture. So I even commented that that was a little ass backwards. They treated me as if I was a corporate asset. So once I got to a period where the cost benefit according to them was negative, I was cut loose. They used to be what was known in the Jacksonville community as a family company. The word out there now with Blue Cross is definitely not family. About 10 years ago, they started laying off long-term employees, trying to save money. And so in 2008, I came down with cancer in March and went on long-term disability for 6 months. And when I came back, a week after I came back, they laid me off for good after 23 years. So, and I was one of the, I know people that got laid off at the same time as I had, the 32, 36 years, 28 years. What bothered me the last 2 years I worked for Blue Cross, I saw the number of foreign workers who were brought in to replace the work that had previously been done by full-time workers who were usually American. And I just didn't understand why I didn't hate the Indian workers. I know that they're trying to support their families the same as I am, but it still bothered me that U.S. workers were losing their jobs because these contractors were taking that work from them. I didn't know the circumstances. I didn't know at that time the difference between the visas, the B1 visa, the H2B visa. I don't know what, but all I knew is these guys were working and my former buddies weren't. Pardon my French, that's bullshit. And that's, I know for a fact there's gobs of people out there in America that have that experience, but they think that it's cheaper to bring in guest workers who they can let go or they can hire on the cheap, and after the project is done, then let go. So there is a lot more flexibility with the guest worker. There's no question with that. Now there'll be some healthcare professionals saying, oh, he didn't do this swab and he didn't do, I don't do that. No one's using my needles.
Okay, yeah. We had an Easter lunch today, so it's a little, had to have some Easter candy, so it's a little high.
When I saw so many of these Indians taking what I thought were my fellow American jobs, I started saying some pretty bad stuff, and I didn't like the words that were coming out of my mouth. And she would comment, you know.
Because as a nurse, you know, you deal with all types of people, all types of cultures, all types of problems, and we pretty much have to be non-judgmental toward our patients to provide good care. But, you know, there is definitely, in the last few years, there's definitely an influx of Indian families here.
I was saying some pretty what would be considered bigoted stuff.
Yeah.
And I didn't
and
like
that bothered me because
I'm not.
We aren't that
But I
generally
couldn't.
that way. But what about Jordan? Is he still sticking it out there at Blue Cross?
Yep.
What grade is he? Is he freshman or sophomore this year in high school?
I was not given an opportunity to go into these other IT areas and apply for that position. I was deemed not skilled enough to do that position, even without any job interview, even without any chance to get the training required to do that job. A lot of these courses, you can learn it in 2 weeks. You're telling me for someone who's been with the company 25 years, you're not going to give them 2 weeks to learn a skill set that allows them to stay with the company? That's just a little short-sighted. And these executives that have been with the Blue Cross for 30 years, they seem to think that their magical managerial skill set, oh no, Indians can't do that. Oh, give me a break. I did work for legal, I did work for human resource, I did work for marketing, and I got commendations time after time again saying I delivered more than what they asked. Thanks a lot for doing that. That was really sharp of you. But I know from working with these Indian workers that they will do exactly what you ask them to do and no more and nothing else, because the ingrained culture of them, and once again I'm saying it in almost a bigoted fashion, them, I hate that, but it's just, I have no way else to express it. They only do what you ask them to do in the job specification. They will not do anything else. And if the job specs are wrong, they will still do it that way because that's what you ask them to do. Obama, as far as I'm concerned, I voted for him. I was a campaign worker for him. I'm very disappointed in what he's doing for the American worker and the future of America, including my son. He's selling us out, as far as I'm concerned. We've told our son that realistically his generation is screwed financially. So I've told Keegan, well, at least, hopefully, if your mom and I die young, which is what we're expecting to do, you'll get a pretty good nest egg for my retirement. So that's what we're saying, you know. That's, and unfortunately,
He's
that kind of
become
language,
much more cynical.
That kind of language, parents are not used to saying that kind of stuff. In America, the generation, it used to be a given. The next generation is going to have an improved standard of living and improved lifestyle, and we already know that that's not going to happen.
I've noticed over the years since he's been let go by Blue Cross, he's become very cynical. It's hard to see him like this, yeah. Sometimes I have to smack him. But, you know.
I worry about our son, I really do.
Yeah.
Their future is screwed. Screwed, blued, and tattooed. They got nothing.
Blue Cross refused to give any comment for our report. It's clear that many influential people in the business community and on both sides of the aisle in Washington think that temporary guest workers are vital for our economy. We tried numerous times to reach out to major guest worker employers and their lobbyists in Washington. Even they declined to answer our questions and make their case. We plan to explore the guest worker system from the point of view of the foreign workers brought here on temporary visas. As you will see, it's not only Americans who are losing out when companies scour the globe for ever cheaper labor. It's all part of a brave new world of work. We end our report tonight back in New York Harbor, where tourists from around the world come to learn and experience America's rich immigration history. There is the Statue of Liberty, which for decades was a welcome sight for the millions of immigrants crowded on ships who had just endured an often harrowing journey across the open Atlantic. Ellis Island, the famed entry point for the great European migration boom of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, is now a national museum. And those who stop to study the pictures and read the exhibits learn that many who came to America in what is now considered a golden age of immigration faced hardships and sometimes even violent discrimination. America is a nation of immigrants. But each new wave changes our country and disrupts the status quo. And into this complex history falls the current guest worker system we've looked at tonight. The business leaders who advocate expanding today's guest worker programs are eager to tie them to America's most noble immigration traditions, another chapter in the history of a land that has drawn the world's strivers and adventurers from its earliest days. They say many of these guest workers will set down roots in America and help build the economy and create new jobs. But critics, like the American workers you heard from tonight, say these temporary guest worker programs are taking away American jobs, not creating them. They say the programs drive down wages, exploit foreign workers, and are undermining the American dream. With unemployment so high and the economy still struggling to recover, these debates take on ever more importance. We will continue to follow them. And that's our report for tonight. From Governor's Island in New York, for HDNet, Dan Rather reporting. Good night.
If you would like to add your name to an email list for information on upcoming programs, or if you would just like to send a question or comment, please email us at viewer@hd.net.
The following is an HDNet original presentation.
Good evening from Governor's Island in New York. The big news on everybody's mind these days is the high unemployment rate. It's over 9%. Nearly 14 million men and women without a paycheck. But despite that sobering number, there are jobs in America, thousands of jobs, as you'll hear tonight, that are going to what are known as foreign guest workers. We've always been a nation of immigrants. The millions who passed through these waters a century ago helped fuel an unprecedented era of prosperity. Today, America's business leaders say we need to continue to attract the world's best and brightest talent to compete in a global economy and to create new American jobs. But tonight you're going to hear the voices of Americans who feel they've been displaced by foreign guest workers, who say the temporary worker program is different from immigration of the past. You will hear raw emotions, anger, and a lot of questions about why respected business leaders like Bill Gates would be arguing that America needs...
That one really makes it hard for me to see. It's like when I started to understand what was going on with why I was laid off, it was like peeling back an onion, and I continue to just feel that every single time you pull it back, it's worse than what you would ever imagine. And it's just not what I thought I was doing. I mean, I was taught to work hard and do well in school, and I did all that stuff, and I did a great job, and I would never imagine that I would have been out of work for 2 years, aggressively looking for a job, becoming a Phi Beta Kappa student, and it just doesn't matter.
I was a music major in college, and after I graduated from college, I moved to New York and worked in Wall Street. And as a music major undergrad, there's not that many jobs, so I had to start out as a secretary. And I worked my way through graduate school at night at New York University and got a degree in MBA in computer applications and ended up spending 12 years on Wall Street. So when I was age 31, I got promoted to being a vice president at JP Morgan in the mergers and acquisitions area doing quantitative analysis type of work. Let's see, I've lived in Seattle since 1992, moved here from New York. My favorite thing is being outdoors, being with my boyfriend, and hiking, biking. Thanks, sweet. I never had to worry about getting a job, ever. I could get a job in 5 minutes. People were calling me all the time. The world was my oyster. And there was never, ever a problem finding work. It changed in January 2009 when I was laid off from my job at Microsoft. They said that my position had been eliminated. I go into the room and there's somebody there with someone from Human Resources, and they had a package for me and said they're happy to go through everything in there, but that my position had been permanently eliminated and that I could leave that day. Thankfully, I called my boyfriend, and he came and helped me collect my personal belongings and said goodbye to a couple people, and that was it. I never had that happen to me before. I've always done very well, and I couldn't, for the life of me, figure out what it was, and I thought, oh my God, have I gotten old? Am I losing my edge? I have no idea. It wasn't until a couple days later that I really figured out what was really disturbing about it, and it's because I was, for the most part, the most senior person on my team, and I was the only person laid off from the team. And 3 of the people that I worked with had been in the United States less than a year. I mean, up until that point, I was kind of maybe ignorance is bliss. I mean, I just had been one of these people that had always been accustomed to working in a global environment. So I just assumed that global business is global business, and I don't know if one person has a special skill versus one that doesn't. And I know that Microsoft recruiting is very, I guess I would say, elite. And so, you know, it seemed that they were always hiring people from all around the world. And I kind of wondered, why weren't they hiring people from the local community as much? But I think that's a question a lot of people here ask.
After Mary was laid off in early 2009, she started to realize that somewhere along the line, the job market had changed. It wasn't like the tech companies in Seattle weren't hiring. It's just that they often seemed to be looking for foreign guest workers. Every year, U.S. companies use special work visas to hire tens of thousands of foreign guest workers for jobs across the country. The H-1B visa in particular is for, quote, specialty occupations, mostly in the high-tech realm. Mary, like most people in tech, says she'd always thought that by law, companies must first try to hire American workers. But that's not the case. According to Department of Labor guidelines,
more foreign workers when so many of our fellow citizens are struggling to find a job.
I cannot overstate the importance of overhauling our high-skilled immigration system. We have to welcome the great minds in this world, not shut them out of our country. Unfortunately, our immigration policies are driving away the world's best and brightest precisely when we need them the most.
You know what I want to say? Bill Gates, I'm the best and brightest, hire me. I've proven myself to you and everybody else, and I can assure you, if you want to stack up the people in my students with any guest worker and the skills that they have, they're going to be just as good, if not better. And they understand the culture, they understand the society, they paid their dues, they're part of the community. We are here, we are the best and the brightest.
So yeah, this is the lovely Microsoft campus. And here is the building that I worked in for a few years when I worked at Microsoft Office. I think, I'm not sure exactly, it's one of these buildings. It's the one that Bill Gates had started in or had like the original campuses across the street. But here's building 36.